Welcome back to the Nassau Hockey Podcast. James, I think we need to start the show with a little bit of an apology. This is mostly a joke, but it's not 100%.
Okay.
Josh Bailey and maybe Anthony Baviglia. It turns out Ross Johnston as well. Turns out it wasn't their fault. It could be something else. I think we need to figure out what that is. Maybe we will during the course of this episode. But it turns out it wasn't just those two players and the oft-scratched Johnston who made this team who they are, and who we're seeing right now. How do you? I know it's mostly a joke, but how do you feel about that as an idea? That it's so much more than any one individual kind of playing poorly.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And that all has to do with, you might have, you always say the Islanders are more than a sum of their parts. Um, you have to have the right leader, though. You have to have the right guy behind the bench. And look, I don't necessarily think that Lane Lambert's a bad coach. Um, but I don't think he's the right one, at least not right now, because he hasn't shown me anything, right? Like, a couple of things about Barry Trotz. One, he came in as one of the winningest coaches in the NHL. If you're going to have a team that lacks star power and scoring ability, but can be a defensive juggernaut and have the best goaltending in the NHL, you could kind of see how that might work. That's not happening under Lambert. And the other thing too is, like, he hasn't done anything that has, like, created a spark. Like, one of the things that Barry Trotz did right away when he came in as the Islanders head coach, if you remember, if memory serves, he had said to his former teammates, or his former team that he coached, first thing he said to them was, "Loved winning a cup with you guys. You want to do it again? You're gonna have to come through the fucking island."
Oh, it's the
Where is
rallying cry from
where
there.
is that? Where is that from Lane? Right?
It was a
And I got to
different
be honest.
it was a different opportunity for Lane when he came in. I also like that we're starting the show like this. We'll get back to the notes in a second. I think
Yeah,
it was a different opportunity for him. He was had to prove himself in a very different way,
sure.
and uh, Trotz didn't have to do any of that. He came
I
in and
think
he
that
was
that's accurate. However, what my feeling on this is, he has to find, and again, like you're saying, different circumstances, but he has to find his rally cry for something, right? Because more often than not, like right now, you know who was rally crying? Casey Cizikas. You don't like what is going on in front of you? Go home. We don't need that shit in the stands, right? Where's that fire from Lambert? Because if he gets a little fiery, the player's going to get a little fiery for him, and all of a sudden they're going to start playing better hockey. But you're not really seeing that from Lane. Instead,
do you think that's true though? Because
I do.
I wonder if they really need. I mean, what he's doing now isn't working, so maybe you're right. I wonder if that's the step that they need though. And I
What I'm
think
seeing,
go ahead.
what I'm seeing is a coach on the panel, night in and night out, who's, I don't want to say emotionless. That's not the right word, but lacks a fire in that emotion and doesn't really have too much emphasis on urgency for this team. Whereas, with another coach in a different situation a couple of years ago when Trotz first came in, right away it was, you're gonna have to fucking come through us. From Lambert, it's, I hope we do better. It's never, oh, we're gonna be better. Oh, we're gonna get this shit straightened out. It's
The way that I think about it sometimes is when they're playing angry hockey, it's often unfocused, and that's what they're playing now. They're already
right.
largely unfocused, so they need to find that middle ground. And I think maybe in a slightly different in slightly different phrasing, they need to play energized. I like the word urgent. I like that. I like that word for this team because that's who. I mean, again, you think about this team over the last 10 years. And going back to that Pittsburgh series in 2013 and that short season, they were that, especially the fourth line, and they might not be able to be that anymore. Clearly, they can't, but or at least not every single game. Which you can go listen to an earlier episode of this season, and we both said that, and I know we weren't the only ones saying that, but they're lacking that energy overall. They're not out there. They're not hard to play against, and I hate that. That makes me sound like a Neanderthal hockey commentator, where it's not even necessarily about toughness either. They're not hard to play against anywhere on the ice, and that was a staple of this team. And the roster has changed a lot, but that's ultimately what made this team good, at least in two zones. They really needed the help on offense, and I don't think that I don't want to say risk, that's not the right word, but they haven't transferred all this. They're not scoring a ton of goals, in other words. They're not outscoring their problems. They're giving up a ton of goals and then also not scoring. So even though some personnel has changed, mainly Bavillier and Bailey for Horvat and Engvall, it it's still they're still not scoring enough on a regular basis. Obviously, getting shut out by I can't remember who played for the Edmonton Oilers the other night. Skinner. Both goalies are terrible. I don't think the other guy that came up after Campbell was waived. I don't even think he's come up yet in a game. And if they can't get up for that game for a team that's that bad, maybe it is the coach. Maybe it is. They don't. I love again. I love that word, that urgency word, the energetic play, and toughness to a degree. Again, just difficult to play against.
And what was most alarming too was against that Oilers team where, just last night, 2 nights ago, as you're hearing this, they came out hot, scored 30 seconds in, Matt Barzell, right? They were all over the Oilers, and suddenly they let off the gas, and that was it.
Well, they're letting little things derail their game. It's a penalty here and there. Even a goal against. They're not able to rebound. And again, I don't know. And I said this last season. I think a big part of it is Lambert at this point because you can't change all the players. You can't change the on ice leadership overnight. You can change the coach. It's a lot easier. I don't know what his contract looks like. I don't know what Ledecky or Malkin want to continue to pay out. Um, but that focus, it used to be that they couldn't start the games. Now they can't maintain that focus because they're coming out and doing it. And then they're letting these little speed bumps completely derail their game. And that to me comes from behind the bench. You need somebody back there you need someone that can energize you, but that can also calm you down. He's not able to walk that fine line that it seemed Trotz was fired up behind the bench, but he seemed to find the moments when he could settle everything down, whether that was between periods
You're right.
or on the bench.
And that's the thing. He was able to figure out a way to curate that anger into energy on the ice. It didn't translate from anger to anger between coach to player, but it translated from anger to energy from coach to player in the sense that the player was more motivated to play a better game rather than play an angry game. That's honestly, any of that is absent from the Islanders currently. They're not even playing angry, they're playing awful. But there was something about Trotz's ability to get angry at, let's say a referee or a situation or something like that. And it didn't translate to player anger. Instead, it just turned into, okay, we got to be better on the next play. There's none of that happening on this current Islander team right now. Um, Look, hindsight's 2020, and we can say, you know, we can pass judgment on the coaching. It's just, we're almost at 100 games of sample size here with Lane Lambert behind the bench. It's just not good. It's
And I think because a lot of the conversation after Trotz left was, and maybe it was more of a narrative than the truth, and Lamorello would never tell you anyway, was that the Islanders were afraid of losing Lambert. So it was better to just bring him up and part ways, however amicably, with Trotz and bring him up. I think the mistake is he probably is a good coach and an up and coming head coach in this league, just not with a team that lacks talent and that desperately needs structure and a sense of urgency to be successful. Because you saw a team again, even I don't know, the last of the Tavares years, a team that could score a lot of goals but didn't have that structure defensively. And eventually it didn't quite even out. It was still more on the conservative side of things when obviously when Trotz was around, but it wasn't like they didn't score any goals. Like they obviously won hockey games. They figured out whatever that formula was, that very thin line that they needed to walk on. Um, but like the roster, I guess it's so much different than it 14, 15, right? You really can't. There's some players that have been around for that long, but by and large it's different. But the DNA of the team kind of remained the same. And that's why I keep bringing up 2013, really fight night 2011, I think, where it was truly forged, and it took a couple of years for the talent to kind of catch up to that and build around what that was, have buy-in from the entire team. But since then, the DNA just didn't change for 10 years, up and a little less than, because last year it was different and this year is different. The whole ethos of the team, who they are, is different. I guess my question is, who are these Islanders? What's their identity? And I don't think that's a question we've had to ask ourselves in years. We knew
no.
exactly who this team was, and now they completely lack identity. Who are they?
And that's the thing, right? Unfortunately, the identity has become a team that breaks down way too often rather than a team who is a pain in the ass to play against defensively. Like you know that when you're going to Long Island or if Long Island's coming at you, that you're in for a tough matchup. Teams aren't thinking that anymore. And we're talking about again, 2 nights ago, they played the Oilers, who are sputtering. Like worst in the NHL right before last night's game, before last night's win. I think they're flipping back and forth with the Sharks now. Worst team in the NHL. Granted, yes. Are they actually as bad as their record indicates? No. They have Connor McDavid, they have Leon Draisaitl, they have some powerhouses on that team. However, that's a team that does not have their shit together. And well, if they're beating the Islanders, who are now losers of 5 straight, if they don't have their shit together, what does that say about the Islanders? They don't have their shit together either. So you're looking at a team right now whose identity is, yeah, we're that team that doesn't know how to finish. We'll we'll score a goal, maybe two, take a lead, and squander it. No one's worried when we're holding a lead, and that's the problem.
They're just lost in general. There's no structure anywhere. The team did need to loosen up, but this went way past that. The last 100 games, let's call it. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure we're 82 plus. I mean, with the playoffs, yeah, I mean we're right at that mark. We're in the high 90s. This is who they are. Even adding in, having Fashion break out a little bit, you do lose Parise, who I think was a big part of that identity. Dare I say, a lunch pail mentality. Um, but he wasn't the only one. It was players around him. It wasn't one player doesn't make or break an identity of the team. But you also don't have Lee performing where he should. You have a fourth line that isn't really, maybe outside of Cizikas, bringing it every single night. So you really lost the core of that identity. Maybe there's 4 5 players that made up a chunk of it, and that's uh, there's 12 players on offense. That's almost half. Half of them can't bring it. Engvall sure as shit doesn't do it. For all the good that he does, every s- every single game, I sit there and think this is exactly what people in Toronto were trying to tell us when he came to this team. For however big and strong he just is so passive when another body gets close to him. He very rarely wins those puck battles unless he already has position. He just doesn't know how big he is. He's like a Great Dane. He just does he's just walking into stuff and he has no idea how big he is. And when he can really cause a scene and be successful, he just doesn't do it. That's not Horvat's game. Palmieri brings it a little bit. Nelson's backed off a little bit. I've noticed that he's not nearly as physical. Um, Pajot has been good in the dot. That's it. So, like, even some of the players that you could just depend on being good, even in a very specific role, haven't been there. And then you have some new guys that are not bringing it the same way and shifting that identity a little bit. And a coach who can't redefine who this team is. The identity can change. I don't think that's the argument, but you have to have one. And right now they're just meandering. They're lost. They don't have any energy. There's no rhyme or reason to it other than the mistakes. We're clearly seeing the mistakes, but even the success, we're not seeing. Well, what's the thread? And maybe you have, so maybe tell me. I don't know that I've found the thread for what what actually is adding to success or adding up to success. The games that they've won, the goals that they're scoring, it seems very haphazard that they're just. I mean, everyone's going to score a goal. Like you're going to score a goal eventually. I don't know that there's nothing like, oh, okay, this type when they get into this mindset and they're really forechecking or they're cycling or this or whatever, maybe the second line because they have that chemistry. I don't know any other line that's doing that though. There's just
Well, I think that's it. I think that is it. I think it's when the second line is going, they get a power play goal. Noah Dobson is going, and Sorokin or Varlamov steal a game. All five of those things have to happen in order for the Islanders to win right now. That's what it feels like, right? They're doing this right now. Like the games they won were in spite of Barzell and Horvat chipping in. Like they're losing the games that Barzell and Horvat are chipping in. So really right now it needs to be a perfect storm for the Islanders to win a game. Like it's concerning.
and on top of that, Sorokin isn't stealing them games.
No. But the thing is, and this is what I was thinking about when you were just speaking a little earlier. You know, last season when Lane Lambert took over, the emphasis was put on we have to play faster, we have to play more offensive, and he tried to change the system a little bit. It reverted back at some point to a more defensive system because that wasn't working. But now I just wonder if everyone is confused. What is the system? Are we playing a defensive system? Are we playing an offensive system? What is our system? And that's what I wonder. I wonder if there's just confusion as to what kind of team are we? How are we supposed to play our game? Are we supposed to do the things that we did under the Trot Lambert tutelage? Or are we doing the things that we're doing under the Lambert tutelage alone? And that's what I think could be going on right now.
I think that can be part of it. You'd think after a year though that Lambert and his crew and the Islanders, right? It's not like Horvat got here the beginning of this season or Engvall got here at the beginning of this season or I mean like Gauthier, I guess, and the other guy who hasn't really played, he's in the A. So really just him. He's like the only new player. Bashing's been around. Holmstrom and Wallstrom have been around. It's not like there's not a whole lot of new people that haven't been here for almost 12 months. Now, granted, the summer was a little longer than anyone would have liked. Um, but they've had tons of practice. They have tons of um, chalk talks and video sessions and all sorts of things. If you don't know it by now, if you as a coach, now if you as a player don't understand what the coach is saying, that's a problem. Players need to do that. But it could be the communication of the coach and that it's not landing with the players. And it could also mean that whatever he's saying just isn't good and they're doing what he is saying. I mean, if you take his words at face value and not dig deep like he's just bullshitting everybody, which I tend to believe, they're doing what he's saying. Oh, we've done a lot of good things. That leads me to believe that they're playing the way he wants them to play. They're just not getting the results that they want. And it's a result based game. You have to win hockey games and you have to do it consistently. You can't. They haven't. They have now three after the loss to the Oilers. They have what 3 points in the last 6 games, and now they're on the road, and that could be a disaster for this team, or it could be exactly what they needed. Now that has not started that way, so hard to kind of chalk it up to that. Where it could be exactly what they needed, but the rest of the trip and the games they're playing are all very winnable games. We said that last week. You were going to run into a tough team in the Boston Bruins. The Capitals were going to come out against you because they were embarrassed the last time you played them. You had like 6 shots and 8 goals somehow. And Edmonton, there's no excuse. I'm not sure what happens there. You played like shit. But the rest of this trip, you have an opportunity. You just need to play. You need to play well. I think after this trip is that's the American Thanksgiving. Maybe they steal a couple points here and there. Hopefully not just in overtime losses and shootout losses or whatever. And they're all Western Conference teams, so I'm not really worried about losing points to competitors trying to get into the wild card race or something. But if they don't win a few of these games, and I put it in a Twitter poll on our account, and like what happens after this trip if they don't play well? Does Lou go? Does nothing happen because of Lou? Does Lane go? Are there roster moves? And a lot of people pointed to Lane because it's the easiest one. It's pulling the goalie, as I heard someone say recently. That's the modern equivalent. It's just a really easy thing to change, I think. And I don't have a good grasp on this. Maybe you do. Who do they replace him with? Like John Hines is available.
Well,
Um,
there's a lot of people who tend to believe that what went down in Edmonton is not Jay Woodcroft's fault.
I've also heard that.
So I mean, look, the Oilers were fantastic last season. They couldn't buy a save.
He
They had
doesn't
a
he have the best winning percentage as a coach in like
potentially,
team's history?
yeah, I'm
And
not
this is like they're
100%
the
sure.
team that won 5 cups, right? They've also
Yeah,
had 10 coaches in 13 seasons, so if he has a big enough sample size, it's possible. And he's getting real primo Drysidle and McDavid. Not all of the coaches over the last few years had that luxury. Um, there was a time when Drysidle, that deal where that he just signed wasn't the best thing, and he definitely exceeded expectations on that. But so you think um, Woodcroft, maybe John Hines?
yeah. I'm,
Um,
I'm just saying that Woodcroft is a viable option out there. Personally, if you're asking me if anything's going to happen, no, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think that this is going to be, I don't know, they're going to ride this out for some strange reason. Um, that's just a gut feeling. I don't
do you
have
think the
any.
Islanders are just gonna keep crossing their fingers, and whatever happens, they could be out of it by the end of the month or mid-December at this point?
Yeah, I, I I've been given no reason to believe otherwise. Right? Last season, when Lamorello acquired Bo Horvat, it was leading up to the potential playoff run, which they eventually did go on. But Lamorello doesn't strike me as the type to strike early in order to fix a problem that's clear because he believes in his group, right?
Not recently. He has done things like that in the past on other teams.
Right. I'm talking about his Islanders sample size. His Islanders sample size in his later years of being a GM, these things have been, they rode themselves out. And he's been perfectly okay with saying over and over again, I believe in this group. I believe in this group. They'll turn it around. Say what you will about whether they do or they don't. Your definition of success is your own. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. And there's just something, despite, we've had this conversation, despite this team looking better on paper than it has in a little while, something's up, something's missing. And, you know, not that they have the dollars. They don't. But I look at, a team like the Minnesota Wild was quick to address a need. They needed a penalty killer. They went out and got Zach Bogosian. Small under the radar move, but it was something that they did, right? Um, a couple other trades happened recently that other teams addressing needs. I don't see any reason or I don't see any problem with addressing a need early if you have to. And if you're not going to fire the coach, because let's face it, even if it's not the coach's fault, it just happened in Edmonton. Someone has to be the sacrificial lamb. Something has to change, right? You can't just continue to go down this path.
Well, it just seems if
And
I'm a player and nothing's happening, it just seems like there are no consequences,
right,
right? Nothing is nothing, and now they should. I'm surprised that the Bavillier thing and the Bailey thing are not still resonating. That even though it happened months and months ago, and last season, um, that they're not. It's not still in the back of their minds, like, oh, any of us can just go. As difficult as it may be to find a landing spot, you don't want your boss to want to move you. You don't want your general manager, you when your coach and your general manager are having conversations about the success or lack of success of your team and the players, you don't want to have your name in their mouth. You don't want your name in their mouth. So I'm really surprised it's going to take more. There's like something else needs to happen for you to get your shit together. You need another player to leave, or their family and all this shit, that Casey was saying about when you come for one of us, you come for all of us. And all that in theory is fantastic. Um, but you're there to do one thing. You're there to win hockey games and ultimately the Stanley Cup. And you're getting further from that. Every team that is bad goes through this. I'm not
yeah,
saying we should be throwing jerseys on the ice,
no.
but you know, there's a level of frustration. We are the customer.
The thing is, and again, going back to other teams not being afraid to address a need, now looking at what's going on, you look around the league, right now. Couple teams are willing to sell, namely Calgary. One of their defensemen, Nikita Zadorov, wants out. Another one of their defensemen, Noah Hannafin, was on the verge of a long-term extension. That's dead. Nazem Kadri just said, if we're rebuilding, I'm out. I'll waive my NTC. Right. So there's options, right? There are going to be players available.
Yeah, how do the Islanders do that?
Well, you got to get creative. And this goes back to our conversation last week where the Islanders need their Dubas or their Dubas moment. The Penguins couldn't afford Eric Carlson. Make it happen. He did.
Yeah, I think that's where, so I asked that question, and the response to my own question is that's Lou's fucking job. It's not our job to figure out how to and be uncap friendly and be armchair
Right.
GM. Like he has one job: make the team
Right.
good. I
Exactly.
don't want to have to. There. To your point, there are options. Do literally anything.
Right. Oh, and I'm not saying do anything for the sake of change, for the
Hundred
sake of
percent.
doing anything. Make a calculated move. The blue line is suffering. Well, there's a really good two-way defenseman who can transition the puck well and Noah Hannafin out there. He's going to cost a pretty penny. You're going to have to move some money around. But like you just said, it's not our job to sit on cap friendly and figure out who's going to go where. That's his job. The
And I don't think we're
fact
asking
is,
anything unreasonable either, right?
we're
This is
not.
literally his job.
This is literally his job. The fact of the matter is that, yes, he put himself in a position where he has all of these long term contracts that might be difficult to move. However, that doesn't mean that they're immovable. Anybody can move. Anybody. Wayne Gretzky was traded, and I understand the circumstances were different. No move clause, no trade clauses were not a thing. Whatever. That doesn't matter because other GMs have proven that they can make those things happen, namely Kyle Dubas, who did it with Eric Carlson. I keep referring to that one because it's like the biggest, most recent one I could think of. But it's just the truth. It's not the only example. There are others. But the job of the GM is to make the team better. And all stemming back to this summer, he has done has maintained his mediocrity. And I get, different team because we have Horvat for a full year, different team because we have Engvall for a full year. Well, guess what? The other teams from those playoff runs, they also made trades leading up to the trade deadline. But over the summer, they made some other moves to come into the season and be a little bit better. Not
Yeah.
everybody's a Vegas Golden Knight team that can just sell off Riley Smith to Pittsburgh, re-sign Ivan Barbashev, come back essentially the same, and come out of the gates the way that they have. It's we're talking about that as a main storyline in the NHL right now because it's so rare that that happens, that a team goes unchanged and performs the way they are, especially after a deep playoff run they won the friggin' cup. But if you decide that, oh, I could just keep this roster the way it is just because I believe in them. Look,
That's
I
magic
believe
beans. Like
it's
that's bullshit.
right, right. You have to, if you see other teams around you making impact moves for their teams. I mean, you know, look at um look at the Rangers. Like they made a small move in acquiring Eric Gustafson, who's playing excellent on their blue line.
Didn't the Islanders wait, wasn't he an Islander?
Yes, he was on a PTO. They released him
Not this season.
last.
All right. I mean, that's long enough. I don't know how he played last season, but
He was with Chicago. Played pretty well. Um,
God.
it's these little things that they could do to make improvements aren't happening. You got to do something.
I think it's a matter of being creative as well and being willing to be creative and do some things, as you referenced the Vegas Golden Knights, and if you've done this before, they've made unpopular moves. They won a cup though. They made it to the cup final one year. They got that taste and they just wrote it. And they said, we're anything less than that is failure. They missed the playoffs and they missed the playoffs and then won the cup in the next year. Now they missed it by a point or what a win or something. It was very, very close. And then they come back next year and win the cup. They figured it out. They didn't just sit there and said, "Well, the cap is flat. Maybe next year." If that was the case, and I think we even had this conversation, it's very possible we just like don't need to do anything. If they're not going to make any moves, maybe we talked about this over the summer. See you next year. I think I tweeted about it. Was it me and Capolini or me and somebody? I was like, if this is just what it's going to be, see you next year. We'll have the same conversation next April. It's irrelevant. You're not doing anything, and it's unfortunate. And Lamorello even said as much that he made some of these moves thinking the cap would go up. Well, you had time when some of these players may have had value, and I'm not including Lee in that conversation just yet. But Pajot, I don't know that he has value off the island. I don't know that it's possible to move him without attaching. I don't know what you need to attach. You're gonna give up another first round pick, and then you still need to find someone to fill the slot. Which, if there's a player on the Bridgeport Islanders that's a center, that you on a two way on an NHL and AHL deal, you can bring them up and kind of move Zizekas up and really start moving your roster around. But I don't know. Is that worth it? Do you just make them? Do you just call it? And maybe that's their approach. I don't know. That's the right one. It's only November. The season is 6 weeks old, 7 weeks old. You're just gonna call it already, and they're gonna ride it out. They do a coaching change in after the season, and um, Clutterbuck and Martin will be gone. Maybe they can move some deals when the a Pajot or whatever in the offseason because the cap's going up and other teams can take the deal. But even like Anaheim wasn't interested. The Coyotes were. No one was interested in this guy. I'm not saying you just trade him for future considerations, but because he's not as good as Pacioretty, who apparently just move that guy. But like it can happen. Maybe your underlying point or your main point here is that he just didn't want to. He just
Right.
didn't. He chose not to do it.
I'm still waiting for that future considerations to go back to the Golden Knights from Carolina for that trade that they just handed him over. Granted, look again, hindsight's 2020. He didn't play the whole year because of a ridiculous injury that hampered him, but they didn't know that that was going to happen. No one did, what was it a dodged bullet? Sure, but you can't sit here and convince me, oh, Lamoriello knew something was up with Pacioretty. Nobody knew. He got injured after the fact.
Yeah,
So
and he has made good non-moves. I think it was looking back, hindsight now. Whether or not he knew at the time, I don't know how much credit you want to give him. We've had this conversation a little bit as well. Kadri or Goudreau, boy, those look great. Those non-tinies look real good right now. I am not upset at all. They may have played really well next to Barzell. Irrelevant. I am real happy with Horvat over those two players. I know it was months apart and all sorts of stories, summers and all of that, but I'm way happier that there was a little bit of patience and he got a Lambrell got a player that is really working out. His point total anyway and his impact on the team is noticeable. They're not winning hockey games, but you can't put that on one player. It's that wouldn't be right. And him and Barzell are playing okay. Barzell's on a typical pace. So is Horvat. He's on pace for like 30 plus goals or whatever. There's a lot of good things going for the team. I think Nelson is as well. Um, Palmieri's having a good season, but it does seem like at a certain point they're just going to bail it in. If you're not willing to actually make any kind of moves that might be unpopular even with the fans, I'm not saying that doesn't mean trade Sorokin or Barzell, obviously, but I don't know who that could mean. It could mean Andersley. I think it'd be really hard to move him, but it could mean having to consider shit like that. And it doesn't seem like they're willing to do it. And then for the going from GM and coach to the players, what's your take on how Cizikas and we touched on this for a second, Cizikas and Clutterbuck commented on the fans' frustration. If your GM and your coach aren't going to be there to answer, and then you're not going to be able to respond either when you play like shit, it's really hard to swallow either one of those comments. Frankly, I didn't. If I were them, I just wouldn't have said anything, and I would have kept it to myself. What are your 2 cents on that?
it's a tough situation for Zizekas to be in. He's asked the question, "Did you hear it?" Um, Fact of the matter is that he has a different kind of relationship with Lane Lambert than anyone that's asking that question or sitting in those stands will have. He likes the guy, he plays for the guy, and even if he's not playing fantastic for the guy, that relationship is, that's captain speak. You occasionally he'll wear a letter depending on, if someone's out, but letter or not, he is a leader in that locker room, and he's basically trying to say, "Hey, don't look over there, look over here. Look at me. I'll make this stink. We're not playing well. It's not on him. Make of that what you will." But that's what that was,
I think
in
that's
my opinion.
fine, but then to say that the fans shouldn't say that and then stay home, and he walked it back earlier today, at least a little bit. But I don't know. I think you don't touch it. I think you say what you said. Yeah, I mean it's on the players. It's the product on the ice that's most important, and we're responsible for that. And it has nothing to do with it's disappointing to hear, but ultimately the responsibility is on the players on the ice. I just thought of that right now. Are you telling me he couldn't bullshit that? And he might be my favorite Islander, especially from this era. He might be my favorite Islander. He's been the most consistent, has played all sorts of roles, whatever anyone's asked of him. Talk about a lunch pail guy, huge impact for a really long time. Um, this is the first season we're seeing a different Casey Cizikas as far as his play has dropped a little bit. Take that out of the equation, it's nothing but good. It's nothing but good. So Clutterbuck evened it out a little bit. What did you think of what what he said, which was obviously a little more mild than what Cizikas had to say?
Yeah, and then that's the reason for that is, he's got to put out the fire a little bit, So, look, it was fine what he said. It certainly didn't make headlines like it did for Cizikas. Um, but again, it's literally just everyone in that room, and if, those are the some of the longest tenured Islanders at this point. Cizikas and Clutterbuck, they're upset. This isn't the way. This could be their last year. This, well, not Cizikas, but Clutterbuck. This could be Clutterbuck's last year. This could be Martin's last year, right? This could be Cizikas' last ride with his buddies. They're wearing their hearts on their sleeves a little bit right now. They're definitely frustrated at the way things are playing. Is that frustration translating well onto the ice? No, it is not. Um, but I think that's what that is. Some frustration that if this is in fact the last year that they're going to be together, the band is going to be, on that line. This isn't the way they want to go out. And so, that's maybe why Suzuki said what he said, and why Clutterbuck is like, okay, let's reel it back in a little bit. Although he's not that wrong, and that's not me saying he's not wrong. That's, Clutterbuck saying, yeah, we don't want to hear that. But, again, that the onus is on the players. You don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
You got to perform better. You got to do better in front of you. And it's difficult to be in that position where this is potentially our last ride, and this is the way we're going out. Sucks. We don't want to hear that, but that's what we're putting out on the ice in front of you. So it's what you're gonna get.
Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code THPN. New customers get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 186 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK or text HOPE New York 467369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023, all rights reserved.
The holidays are the most chaotic time of the year. It may be too early to start decorating for the holidays, but it's never too early to start your holiday shopping. Why not take care of it now before the crowds and packed calendars make shopping a total nightmare? Especially when you can get some of the best deals of the season well before Black Friday. You can shop Raycon products right now and save up to 50% off because their early Black Friday sale is going on right now. Raycon's wireless earbuds are some of the best bang for your buck earbuds you can get on the market right now. Raycon first made a name for themselves in the audio space, with products like their everyday earbuds known for delivering high quality and thoughtful features, like a 32-hour battery life and a perfect in-ear fit for all-day wear and lasting comfort. And in this past year, they expanded their entire business with the introduction of Raycon Home and Raycon Power Tech. Their 5-star reviewed Magic 180 cable allows you to charge iOS, micro USB, and Type-C devices 8 times faster with 100-watt power delivery. Raycon is known for delivering high-quality audio and thoughtful features at half the price of other premium tech brands. It's no wonder their products have racked up tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. To get everyone in the holiday shopping spirit a bit early, Raycon is currently offering 20% off everything on their site with select products up to 50% off. So beat the crowds and save now. Trust me, you do not want to miss out on Raycon's early Black Friday sale. Hurry now to buyraycon.com/THPN to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. That's buyraycon.com/THPN to score up to 50% off Raycon products. buyraycon.com/THPN.
Speaking of the fourth line and when that it could be their last ride, we got a sneak peek of what the possible changes and the fourth line not being together, and they were all in theory healthy. Some lineup changes heading into the game in Edmonton: Martin out, Goche in, Fashing out, Wallstrom in. um, it didn't work, but could you see more changes coming? We asked for accountability, and some changes started to happen. Some players were in and out of the lineup the last few games. Um, Lane, if you're listening, love that you're a listener of the show. Um, but what do you think of these moves, even though they didn't work? And do you see more coming?
Well, what well do they have to go back to now?
I mean,
That's one of
you can move some things around a little bit
sure.
more.
No, you're right. But what are who are they going to put in at this point? You want new blood in the lineup. You're going to have to reach down into Bridgeport. Um,
And you
I
don't really
think
have the room to do it. You don't have the literal roster space or the money.
yeah, you tweeted this from the NHP account, but Iskakov is playing great, 10 points in 12 games. Do you reach for I don't know, Robin Salo who's showing some flashes on the blue line? There's not too much depth in Bridgeport either, quite frankly. How is he? William DeFore is a goal and two assists in 9 games.
Yeah, and
Not
they're and
much.
and Bridgeport's scoring goals from what I'm seeing. It's not like they're going in and getting
Yeah,
goose egged either. They just lost
yeah.
5-4 to Syracuse earlier today, yesterday. Um,
I think it was earlier today. Yeah.
um, so it's not like they're not scoring goals, and he's just not in on it. Well, that's exactly it. They're scoring goals, and he's just not in on it somehow. Maybe he's playing well on other parts of the ice. A little harder to keep track of, I guess. Go check out Up the Turnpike and our buddy Mitch over there for some prospect news. But yeah, I don't know if you go get if you try to you can waive Holmstrom and bring up Ishkakov, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right move. The next thing for me is fashing Cizikas and Goche as a fourth line to really see if that works and see if that balances out anything. Maybe you get a couple more penalty killers that are, hopefully one of them plays on the PK if Clutterbuck is out, and try to. It's really the last ditch effort to have the most turnover on the roster to see if that's even it. Is it the old guys that just don't have it anymore, or what? I'm not sure. That's really after that. I don't know. I think you're dead in the water. By the time they figure out that it didn't work, the season's over for them. It's December or Christmas or whatever, and it's done. They're cooked. Um, but it's another loss against a really bad team. Um, where do they go from here? What are the I tweeted a little bit of the joke, and I said that's how we would start the show. What do the Islanders do now? Where do they go? Um, are they cooked? Is time running out? And I'd love to get to some of the questions because I know you have a short evening here tonight. Um, so I want to kind of go through that question quickly, and then we'll finish up with some questions.
Quite frankly, they can't, you know, mail it in. They have to build on what they got because their core is signed for quite a while. You have both Barzell and Horvat in the first year of their 8-year deals. Um, you have Lee for the next well, 2 seasons after this. You have Engvall for the next 7. Cizikas for the next 3. You have Pelican Pulak for the next 6 and 7. Mayfield for the next 7. Sorokin for the next 8. Where's this core going? Nowhere. So you're gonna have to build around those guys. You're gonna
Yeah.
have to continue pushing for playoff opportunities. I mean, do you settle for that mushy middle, try and accrue some draft picks in the teens and hope that they work out to be a David Pasternak?
I mean, they need something in that regard. They
Right,
need to get some first round draft picks here and there.
right. So it'll be interesting.
Um, I agree. They got to do something. There's time in the near future, the next few seasons, where I imagine Nelson comes back. I'm not sure about Palmieri. I don't know about Lee at this point. But there's time in years from now, not this coming off season, and not even the one after that. So I think to your point, they can't mail it in. They have to do something. Because right now, the who you would even want to sell off isn't worth that much. Not as much as it means to your team. So
Yeah, I mean,
that I think is a little bit of the issue that this team is going through.
well, unfortunately, there's and this is the decision they're going to have to make if it continues to go down this road. Their most valuable asset that they could sell is probably a guy named Brock Nelson. 2 years left at a really reasonable cap hit who can score 30 to 40 goals. You hate the thought of it, but other side of 30, you need some assets. That's a guy who can potentially retrieve you something pretty.
Yeah.
Maybe even JG Pajot, who, again,
Oh, that
other
one's an
side of,
easier one, I think, for most
oh,
people.
it's for sure it's easy, but other side of 30, he'll have, at this point, 2 years left after this season. And, by the time they trade him, maybe it's only 2.5 years that they're dealing with it. Um, I'm not sure it'll retrieve him that much, not as much as Brock Nelson, certainly, but it's something to think about. They'll keep on to Noah Dobson. He's a solid piece to build around. He's playing really well. I think the same for Romanov. I don't see any reason why he can't stick. Um, but you're not trading Pellick and Mayfield. No one's going to take those contracts. Um, and that's really it.
Let's get to some questions. I agree on all fronts there. We have a couple. I'll look through our Twitter just in case some people were just asking rhetorical questions or just trying to be funny. So we won't go Um, we won't go into any of those. Um, Michael Valdini. And I don't know how serious this was. Um, I don't think I think I know the answer. But maybe just for the lulls. Um, he asked, circling back on Bailey, do they take a flyer on him?
I hope they do and start winning because that would be hilarious.
Right. I mean, that's the ideal situation.
For for
I don't
purely the chaos.
for the chaos. I obviously don't think that that's an actual solution to
No.
anything. And if you're going to spend, and then granted, you'd come back on like a super low deal, but they don't really even have that. And then so you're saying about moving Holmstrom off the roster, you have to waive him, or somebody else, and who cares if they get picked up? It's whatever. If you're picking up Bailey, who cares? You'd let whoever go. Um, yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily the answer. We talked. Tim Roberts also asked if Lane is out, who replaces him. We touched on that a little bit. Um, any
Yeah,
idea what?
again, a Woodcroft to John Hines, I think those are good viable options. I don't know if this is insane to suggest Daryl Sutter's out there.
I mean, that's a lot of structure, and
That's my point.
yeah, but that Calgary team was. I mean, they're still miserable, and they suck more than they did,
Hmm.
but they were unhappy with that man behind the bench. The spark ran out real quick. Now he's turned teams around, and obviously won cups. God, that would be a Lamorello thing to do.
Oh, it sure would.
That'd be a real Lamorello thing to do. And you know what? I honestly don't give a shit who it is. I just want it to fucking work.
Right.
They
That's the
just they
point.
just need I don't care if it's Sutter. I like I have no opinion on any of these people that could come in if they win. If they lose, that's it. I really it's fucking irrelevant. I don't care what the style is. I don't care if they make them skate on their hands. If they're winning, it doesn't matter. They just need to figure that part out. They
Well, and
need
my
to be able to
point,
get more out of
my
this
point to
roster.
you, John, is does Sutter have the resume to make that happen?
The resume as of late, I don't know.
As a in as a whole.
I don't know because you can. It really, I think it really depends. Ken Holland, right in Edmonton,
Hmm.
he's got a great resume 20 years ago. Mike Babcock has a great resume 20 years ago. It, this is a game of what have you done for me lately, and what
Fair.
have you done in general, and I don't. Has Sutter been able to keep the magic alive? Does he have the ability to have an influence? Now, this is a more of a veteran team. It's not a lot of young players. He could have the right impact. It really just depends if it connects. Right now, and what we're seeing with Lambert is that it's clearly not. And it did with Trotz for the most part. They weren't perfect, but and I think this is a little bit of rose-colored glasses. Let me know if you agree. We were just as frustrated at times, seemingly just as frustrated with how the Islanders were playing and how inconsistent they were and losing streaks and backing into the playoffs and all this other stuff and the way that they would lose some games. But this is maybe it just feels like we were that frustrated. It seems like a dream scenario to have Trotz behind the bench again. To come to for this team to be who they used to be, it seems like a fantasy compared to where they are now.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me, that was the biggest change.
And I think I mean, this is a perfectly good note to end on as we kind of finish some thoughts here. Um, maybe it's not as low hanging fruit as it seems, and actually is just the right thing to do. If that's the biggest change, because again, the roster, yeah, okay, some players, whatever. it really wasn't a big deal, at least from the outside. Maybe in the locker room, it's very different. I imagine it is. But the biggest change overall is the coach. And something is there. There's a missing link. How everything is gelling together. Rather, it isn't gelling together. Um, your point of like it's 100 games. I think we know. What are you waiting for? What are you seeing that we're not seeing? You made the playoffs like on accident. Like you didn't want to, and you're like, ah, shit, we got to play five. We got to go play 2, 3 games now. Like it's good for the owners, good for the team making some money. Other than that, I think that gives them some false confidence. Now, how they played in that series should have dispelled that immediately. They should have had no confidence, in fact, after that series. They should have known everything that they needed to do in that offseason immediately, right away. They played like horseshit compared to the Hurricanes. They looked dead in the water the entire time, outside of 6 minutes in one game where they scored 4 goals. How do you not know? Again, a lot of that's on Lamoriello, on giving Lambert or not giving Lambert the pieces. But the team, if the team really hasn't changed, I think that's it. I think it's a good point.
I mean, that's the greatest common factor here is that, or least common denominator, whichever mathematical term you want to make this,
Yeah,
is
not math guys here.
the no, definitely not. I do words for a living, but um, the real truth of the matter is that everything changed when it was the coach that changed, not the players, because the players changed year over year. There was different parts, but up until Lane, it was the same success or similar success. Then Lane comes in and everything changed.
Well, when Lane's the only voice, I imagine he was in those conversations. I don't think Trotz was just there
Sure.
as a dictator. Um, but as the only voice and raising and prioritizing things that he believes should be prioritized, yeah, we're seeing the lack of fruit of the labor. And I part of it, and to circle back to how we had started this conversation about their identity, is it doesn't seem like they're trying very hard. Like the effort isn't there. I'm sure they're very tired afterwards and there's effort and whatever, but not like it used to be. There's just again, as we said, it's that urgency, it's that energy. Like you don't, you're not like, you know what? They really got 4-1. It didn't feel like they lost 4-1. It felt like a much better hockey game than that. I don't think I've said that about any of their losses. Hell, when they win, I'm like, how? Other than the score, I don't know how. Like, and that's every single game that they're winning. They've not like outright dominated in 15 games this season or however many games they've played. And I haven't sat there and been like, they were the better hockey team. You're gonna win when you're not at times. That's perfectly fine. At all, you're not gonna do that at all. That's a problem. You're gonna win games like that 3-0 or whatever it was against the Capitals. Fine. You were happy about that? They walked out of that rink saying, that's sustainable. That's who we are. I don't know. Barzell kind of disproved that by saying, I don't want to back into the playoffs anymore. I want us to be a dominant team. I want us to
Right.
be in control. Is this that? Is this a
Not
team
even a
in
little bit.
they're not in control of anything.
Not even a little bit.
So I think this is gonna be a long road trip. Some late nights here. Um, we should probably just hit hit the stop record button now and catch up with everybody next week. What do you think?
Yeah, let's hope for a more positive podcast next week, huh?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I wanted to end on some positive things. We kind of just got into a very one track episode here. And that's fine. It happens. Um, but yeah, crossing our fingers that we come in next week. They've rebounded a little bit. They feel like they're making some progress. They get back into the playoff conversation, and then it's Thanksgiving. We can all breathe for a second, at least for a day, and then get right back to it. But yeah, let's wrap it up here. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Nassaman Hockey. Make sure to follow along during games. I try to be as active as possible on Twitter. I'm trying on other platforms. It's real hard to do every single one, especially during a game, but definitely there on Twitter. You can find James' work at our enemy, New Jersey Hockey Now, and the fourth period, who we like, even though they don't talk about the Islanders nearly as much. They ought to, because perhaps it's going to be chaos real soon. Hopefully not. James, bring us home.
Till next time, get it together, Islanders.